Welcome to the Ukraine Right Now channel. European Union will not provide Ukraine with aircrafts and tanks, Macron. Macron confirmed the existence of restrictions on the supply of certain types of heavy weapons to Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron has confirmed that Western countries have an agreement not to provide Ukraine with certain types of weapons, in particular assault planes and tanks, in order to avoid being dragged into a war with Russia. He said this during an interaction with Ukrainian journalists. "You talk about unofficial agreement, but it is almost an official position of NATO partners that we help Ukraine to defend itself, but we do not enter into a war with Russia. So certain weapons, like attack planes or tanks, have been agreed not to supply, and President Zelensky is aware of this agreement," he said. Macron added that France is helping Ukraine mainly with ammunition and certain types of weapons, armored vehicles, and has also provided 12 Caesar Sau. But President Zelensky asked for additional ones, and 6 more will be added to these 12 in the near future, the French president promised. Recall, on June 16, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi arrived in Ukraine. The European leaders visited Irpin, after which they met with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Emmanuel Macron promised not to force Ukraine into peace talks with Russia. He said that the Ukrainian authorities must personally determine the conditions for a dialogue with the Kremlin. Pathologically insecure, psychologist named Putin's childhood traumas that made him a dictator. The expert noted that the Russian president had a difficult childhood, which provoked megalomania and psychopathy. Psychologist Yelena Shershnova said that Vladimir Putin became a dictator and murderer because of the influence of 2 childhood traumas. Shershnova refers to the data of Polish journalist, lawyer, and author of the book, Vova, Volodya, Vladimir, Kristina Kirchab-Redlich. She found out that Putin had changed his biography. In fact, he had a difficult childhood and tyrannical parents. In fact, Putin was not born on October 7, 1952. In Leningrad to the family of Vladimir and Maria Putin, but in 1950 near the Urals. He never knew his father, and his mother, Vera Patina, gave her son to her parents shortly after his birth. Later the woman arranged her personal life in Georgia and took the boy, said Shershnova. Kirchab-Redlich found out that in Georgia the stepfather gave Putin a real hell. He beat him, starved him, and brutally abused him. A few years later, he was handed over, as a package, to his grandparents, and later to relatives from Leningrad. They became his official parents. Little Putin didn't have a better life in his new family. The cruelty of his official father is still remembered by the dictator's peers. At the time, 2 childhood traumas had already completely destroyed the psychology of the Russian president. Thus we have at least 2 strong traumas, the change of families and physical abuse. Because of his childish egocentrism, Putin became pathologically insecure, Shershnova noted. The psychologist explained that the human psyche can perceive physical violence in 3 ways. Capitulate to the trauma and accept the role of the victim for life. Try to escape from his pain, for example, into alcohol addiction. Try to compensate for her trauma, in which case she becomes an even greater executioner than her abusers were. Shershnova stated that Putin's pathological insecurity has only increased over the years. He was so inconspicuous that classmates and instructors at the institute did not remember the future president of the Russian Federation. They called him a butt and a pale moth. Putin is constantly trying to prove to the world that he is worthy of attention and as he should be. But the world responds the same way every time, as it did in the institute, added the psychologist. She also noted that the Russian dictator's megalomania and psychopathy are constantly progressing. Earlier, it was reported that the Russian president is so worried about his health that he made it part of state secrets. He is accompanied by about a dozen doctors who masquerade as regular security guards. But, as journalists learned, there is one special agent among them who has an extremely important mission: to clean up Putin's excrement. Hundreds of civilians can no longer evacuate the Azot plant in Severodonetsk. 568 people, including 38 children, are currently sheltering inside the plant. Hundreds of civilians sheltering at the Azot chemical plant in Severodonetsk can no longer evacuate due to continued artillery shelling from Russia. Sergei Gaidai, the military governor of the Luhansk region, told CNN on Thursday. "It's impossible to get out of there now," he reported. I mean, it's physically possible, but it's very dangerous because of the constant shelling and fighting. If anyone gets out, there's a 99% chance they'll die, he added. Gaidai told CNN that 568 people, including 38 children, are currently sheltering inside the plant. The civilians sheltering at Azot have food supplies, but they have not been replenished for 2 weeks, Roman Vlasenko, head of the Severodonetsk District Military Administration, told CNN in a text message Wednesday. He said most of those taking shelter there are employees of the chemical plant, their families and some locals. They've been hiding there since the beginning, he told CNN. There are actual bomb shelters there. Recall, Gaidai also named the number of traitors in Lysychansk who leaked information about the AFU to the Russians. Day 113 of the Putin plan, Mikhail Podolyak. Europe is giving up Russian oil, and then apparently diversifying into gas, which is about half of Russia's GDP. There will definitely be less money. But why would there be any money at all in the camp zone? The Russian economy is going back to the 1990s. Not only auto parts, but also tea bags are in short supply. But it's such a cool import substitution. More than 32,000 Russian soldiers have already been killed, even more wounded. Thousands of pieces of equipment were lost. But the women will give birth to more. And all this for the 4th month of the war instead of taking Kiev or Kharkiv to explain to their Z viewers where the town of Popasna is located and why its capture is a great victory. Well, in response to Peskov's subject, I hope that Moscow can find the strength to really assess the state of affairs, compare its successes with the famous everything goes according to plan, cease fire, withdraw the troops and finish raping its propaganda, deep throats. Today's endless offers of talks from the Russian Federation are nothing more than an attempt to deceive the world, to give the impression of readiness for dialogue, and then to stab it in the back. Settle in the temporarily occupied territories under a temporary ceasefire, set up strongholds, accumulate reserves and restore offensive capabilities. But why show this infantilism so hysterically? Ukraine will definitely return to the negotiation process. Only at the right moment and with a strong negotiating position. When the Kremlin starts to look at things soberly and stops getting drunk on its own propaganda. The European Commission will support the candidacy for Ukraine and Moldova, while Georgia will be rejected. As for Georgia, the European Commission will recommend not to grant such status to the country until a long list of requirements is fulfilled. In its conclusion on the granting of candidate status in the EU, the European Commission will recommend it for Ukraine and Moldova, putting forward additional requirements for the latter, while Georgia will be refused. This was reported by the Dutch publication NOS, citing a reliable source. It is noted that in its conclusion the European Commission will recommend Ukraine candidate status, but with the conditions for the beginning of accession negotiations. In particular, it is a question of the rule of law and combating corruption. It seems that this intermediate step is a curtsy towards such countries as the Netherlands, which believe that Ukraine is far from being ready for candidate status, the weekly said. At the same time, granting Ukraine candidate status is a political signal that most member states want to send Kiev, the NOS adds. Also, candidate status will be recommended for Moldova, but there will be even more requirements for it to start accession negotiations. As for Georgia, the European Commission will recommend not to grant such status to the country until a long list of requirements. As reported by UNIAN, on February 28, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed an application for membership of Ukraine in the European Union. The European Commission on the 17th of June will announce its conclusion regarding Ukraine's application for membership in the EU. A decision of the European Council on granting Ukraine candidate status is expected on the 23rd to the 24th of June.